Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video. It's very common for siblings to grow up jealous of each other and compete over almost everything. My sister and I are no exception to that, as despite the fact that we grew up tolerating each other, there was always a prominent element of competition that ruled most of our interactions, from a point in which we argued about dolls and toys to one when, well, the story happened. Although there's always something different about our relationship, because it seemed like my sister went above and beyond to compete with me over things that shouldn't be topics of competition. For example, she would challenge me to games or dance-offs or whatever she fancied at the time, and when I would inevitably win almost every single time, what can I say, I'm the superior offspring, she would run to my parents, crying to them that I had beat or abused her in a way that allowed her young yet deviant and malevolent little mind to control the narrative, making it that my parents dislike and trust me less and trust her oppositely. And that compounded over time till they got to a point where they were genuinely blindsided by their need to protect her from me and their inability to see through her lies and childish tactics of captivating their attention or putting the blame on me. I think some of the blame falls on me too. As being the older child, I was taught to be irresponsible and adult-like and act grown, and not complaining was always part of that responsibility, which I was taught to handle. So when she would complain to my parents about me and I wouldn't say anything in return, they would assume that I was owning up to what I was doing and she was actually being treated wrongfully instead of acting like any other normal child would at her age. This meant that my parents sided with her and her manipulative tactics most of the time. As I said earlier, this compounded to a point where the damage this was causing was irreversible. For example, when we were in middle school, she would sign me up for competitions or large school gatherings and activities in really considerable quantities. And when I'm obviously unaware that I'm supposed to be participating in them, I wouldn't partake and I wouldn't even go to these events. And eventually, the principal had caught up to this person's name who was signing up in everything and never showing up. He called me to his office absolutely furious with me and scolded me for being a liar, basically installing an authority figure phobia in me and taking away my desire to ever stand up for myself or deny things that I'm accused of, even if I didn't do them. He then contacted my parents and told them that I was a case worth looking into, and told them that my lying habits would eventually land me in big troubles either at school or outside of it. My parents have already been in situations like these, after which they realized my sister was the one lying and actually I was the innocent one. But they confirmed the principal's accusations in his presence to avoid being considered horrible parents that allowed their kids to be horrible and allowed their child to be such a deviant little thing. They actually pinned everything on me. And I think it's needless to say that this was traumatizing to me as a kid. The only thing that this did to me as a developing young mind was make me trust my parents and thus everybody else around me less, and encouraged my sister, on the other hand, to lie and manipulate others however she pleases, because why wouldn't she? Actually, it always landed her exactly where she wanted to be, and she never had to face any consequences or scolding or grounding for it, and that motivated her to develop her tactics and become the most impressively manipulative of any friend bunch. If we isolate the way my parents went about handling this single problem, we would probably explain away most of the things that are wrong with my personality as an adult, and that is excluding every other incident in which they pinned things on me and ruined the parent-child connection that they're supposed to build with me, in the worst parenting manner humanly possible. I'm probably going to post a couple other posts here, telling the stories as I think the whole picture can't be viewed through this single one, but let's move on from it. As previously mentioned, that sense of competition in my sister's manipulative tactics developed as we grew up. And all of it never faded away one bit, and it only compounded considering the fact that there were no consequences involved. There was no reason for these bad habits to fade away, so roughly around the ages of 18, 19, I stopped including her in any of my life affairs. I excluded her from hanging out with my friends and never introduced her to many of them. She was never aware of the people that I like, nor the people I argued with, because these were never the topics of discussion we entertained. explained. We would always talk about the things that would lead to arguments or cause us to not speak to one another for weeks on end, which, even for two sisters around the same age, to have arguments or disputes that would cause them to not speak for many days is mildly concerning. One more thing that I always made a point to hide away from her was the people I was dating. As mentioned earlier, she's not much younger than me, and it wasn't strange for her to feel attracted towards the people I was dating and the boyfriends I was going out with. I guess her sense of competition enticed her to pursue some of them, and she almost succeeded in her goals. I say almost succeeded because her purpose was to get with them and not just ruin it, because those relationships definitely ended after she hooked up with both of them. Though I blame the guys for being weak infidels, I can also see that they didn't necessarily have to feel a strong sense of loyalty towards me, considering that we were only dating for a couple of weeks at the time. My sister, on the other hand, is literally my sister, and there was no bigger FU that she could have given me or worse way to stab me in the face that she could have thought to hurt me with. Now that you have a rough idea of what I had to endure growing up, let me brag about the way I constructed my personality away from all of the toxicity and manipulation that my sister exuded and my parents nurtured. I relied heavily on reading books or listening to music or watching YouTube videos to put together most of my personality quirks and thought processes, which is why I can genuinely look back at everything that's happened and see how utterly insane everything was. In recent times, and basically the reason I'm losing my crap in silence and failing to convince my therapist that I'm not lying and all of this actually happened, is because my latest relationship of 2 years ended with my boyfriend on one knee, asking me for my hand in marriage. It was all fun and games until I tell you that even at this point, he had never even met my parents nor been introduced to my family. So 2 weeks after our literal engagement, I took him over to my parents' home for the holidays to meet them. The moment I saw my sister interact with him, I felt shivers down my spine as flashbacks slapped me in the face of her flirting with the boyfriends she eventually ended up hooking with when we were teens. When we got home that day, I immediately asked my fiance to minimize interactions with her and not entertain her flirtatious or seductive conversations because she is known for being charming and flirtatious and seductive when she's not trying to be. He promised me that day that he wouldn't even gaze her away when they were in the same room together. Although now I can't really tell if he lived up to this promise or not because it would be pretty difficult to get someone knocked up without glancing at them. It would be pretty impressive if he actually kept his promise while getting my sister pregnant. A few months before our wedding date, my sister sent me a text saying she's pregnant and that she needed to talk to me in person ASAP. She told me that, and I quote, she slept with my fiance a few days prior to that conversation, and she's sure he's her freshly conceived baby daddy. She showed me a couple of pregnancy tests and seemed actually joyous about the fact that she was the baby mama to her sister's fiance. If my fiance hadn't confessed that he had slept with her a few days prior to that, it wouldn't even be considered outside the norms that she would lie about something so insane. So it is really needless to say that I broke off the marriage, informed everyone of the failure that my fiance was, and ran off to France to get the hell away from everything. I stayed there for over 6 months, and they were probably the best quality and most peaceful days of my life, which I will give anything to live consistently for however many days I have left on this shitty earth. I have a few more days left before I go back home, and I can't shake off the sinking feeling in my stomach every time I remember my family, even when I have no intentions or plans of connecting with any of them. Update. My so-called vacation came to an end as I foreshadowed in my last post, and I'm not sure if I should be happy or not that I have an update. After I came back to my hometown following those 6 months, because I only consider that a vacation and not a permanent situation yet. 3 nights into being in my home, my parents show up at my doorstep, furious that my sister had run away from home at the youthful age of 21 years old without their permission, specifically because of me. Yes, my sister who ran away because she got knocked up by my fiance was the innocent one, and I was the villain for holding her accountable to the horrific thing she did, and humiliating her into running away from her home. It's kind of like what happened at the principal's office, only now it's not about school competitions, it's about my marriage and her pregnancy. What did I say about compounding? They completely neglected the fact that my sister had gotten herself knocked up by the hands of my soon-to-be husband and came over to rub it in my face and inform me of her newly found motherly joys, neglecting that she and my fiance had stabbed me in the throat and continued the demise of my life, which led me to do a single thing. I shouted at my parents out of my home and kicked them out of my apartment ruthlessly as I could manage, making a point to tell them to never return or come back into my life again. And they didn't, surprisingly. The same can sadly not be said about my sister, who surely did come back. A couple of weeks after I returned, after 6 months, she shows up to my house once again, showing off her belly that she had grown from my fiance, treating her like a queen, expecting me to show emotions of gratitude and love and appreciation for this new, fresh, cool, hip thing in her life. I couldn't even tell if this was just one big inhumane prank that they had managed to pull off to make sure I lost every atom of sanity and survived whatever crap show my life had been up until that point. But from now on, the only thing I can genuinely think to do and never regret is go back to France and start a new life for myself without telling anyone where I am or where I plan to be, because this is the absolute opposite of anything that I would ever want to live. At this point, I don't even know if the love I have for a living and my motivation to succeed in life is enough to fuel my desires to live, not self-diagnosing myself with an irresistible urge to die, but I can safely say that things won't end well for me should I stay in such toxic and mentally abusive circumstances. Next story. Background. My husband has a friend, 33 male. They met at an old job, and the friend Mike even had my husband as his best man when he got married to Abby, 30 female. After Mike and Abby had a baby, things went downhill and they got divorced. Things are still tense between Mike and Abby, but my husband has remained neutral and tried to be there for the baby at the very least. Abby and I hit it off pretty quickly when we met. The daughter became a niece to me as well. Abby even house sat for us on occasion. Knowing the history and relationship with my husband and Mike, she knew Mike would be invited to our wedding. She wasn't fond of it, but she seemed to respect our decision. After we got engaged, I asked her to be a bridesmaid and the daughter to be our flower girl. Both were very excited about it. Knowing that weddings were still a sensitive subject with Abby, I let her know that if she felt like she had to back out, I understood and we would still be friends. A few months later, though, Abby started getting more upset that he would be invited to the wedding. Knowing that Mike probably won't be able to make it due to his work schedule, we assured her that he wouldn't be coming, but he was still due an invite. One day, we mentioned the daughter being our flower girl to Mike, and he was surprised. We had assumed that he already knew. I texted Abby right away to let her know that he now knew, but I thought it was weird that it hadn't been brought up yet. She responded with, "Is he invited to the wedding?" She knew he was. That had never changed. I answered, "Yes, you knew that already though." She didn't respond that night. The next morning, we received a group text from her to my husband and I, telling us that she wouldn't be attending our wedding because he was invited. Also, that she couldn't believe we would do this to her and she could no longer be friends with us because true friends would not put her in such a horrible situation. I told her that I respected her decision not to come to the wedding, but tried to encourage her that we could still be friends. At first, I thought she was just projecting her hurt from the divorce and that she would come around. The next day, she privately texted my husband that I had told her that I didn't love him anymore, apologized to him for having to back out, for not being able to be there for him, and that he deserved so much better than me. He told her that she needed to apologize to me. At this point, I had had enough. I told her that she had crossed too many lines and to send back our house key because she was no longer welcome in our home or around us. She did send the key back, addressed only to my husband, and our past Christmas cards, everything in the bridesmaid proposal box, and a paper revealing a surprise for my upcoming bridal shower. All I was doing was honoring my husband's request that his friend be invited to the wedding. Am I the a-hole for kicking her out? Not the a-hole. You absolutely communicated with her the whole way through, it seems. It's one thing for Abby to not come to the wedding if she can't stand to be near Mike, but giving ultimatums is too far and selfish. Also, texting your husband that you don't love him after not getting what you wanted is just absolutely unhinged. And sending back Christmas cards and ruining your bachelorette surprise, homegirl needs to grow up. Not the a-hole, and honestly, you dodged not a bullet but a goddamn grenade here. She tried multiple times to manipulate by insisting she didn't know about Mike even though you told her point blank multiple times. She tried to put a wedge between you and your husband by insinuating you don't truly love him. She spoiled to you your bridal shower surprise. Not the a-hole. She was definitely trying to ruin your marriage, messaging your husband lying about you behind your back, saying that you don't love him anymore, and that she wanted to comfort him. Like, who says that to someone who's about to get married? It sounds like she was also attempting to have an affair, just to get back at all of you. Your husband for inviting her ex, aka his friend, and you for not disagreeing with it. So she wanted everyone to be upset and bitter like her. If she can't be in a relationship, no one can. Next story. My, female 34, husband and I were married for 10 years before he passed away last year. We have a 4-year-old son. My husband was from a religious family that honestly always seemed to be kind of cult-like to me. His father had passed away when he was young, and he has a mother and sister, both of whom had cut him out of the family when he decided not to practice their religion anymore. They were invited to our wedding but refused to attend because it was not going to be in their church. It could not be because we were both not practicing that religion or living by their words of wisdom. They had only ever been cruel to me and my husband, and only ever spoke to us to try to convert us. They said horrible things to us throughout our marriage and about our child. When my husband passed, they did not come to his funeral and did not reach out to me. Recently, his mom and sister have reached out asking to see my son. I have told them that they are welcome to see him, but I do not want him growing up with any religious bias, so they cannot talk to him about their religion or try to convert him. They promised me and I allowed it. After spending a day with the sister, he came home, and although he had a good time, he told me she had offered to take him to church and he wanted to go. I called her and we argued. She said that church is a big part of her life and she can't just not bring it up. And if he's interested, it's his right to learn about it. The thing is, my husband had horror stories about growing up in that church and wouldn't have wanted it for our child. I told them if they want to see him again, it will only be under my supervision. They were very upset and claimed I'm a bad mom for not letting my son decide for himself what he wants and a bigot for not allowing him to learn about their religion. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. The kid's 4. That's not remotely old enough to decide for himself when it comes to learning about religion, and they know it. Besides, it doesn't really matter what the disagreement is about. You had a condition, they broke it, and they made it clear they never had any intention of taking your wishes seriously. At this point, you being willing to consider fostering any kind of relationship at all is generous, and they really shouldn't be pushing their luck. Not the a-hole. At 4 years old, you can be convinced that the sky is purple and it's dark outside when the sun is shining. This woman took your kid and spent the day talking about how much fun her church is, and then asked him if he wanted to go. Of course he said yes. I would stick to my guns if I were you. These people made their decision about your family long ago, and you were better off for it.